We've been lied to, not once, not in passing, but so thoroughly, so repeatedly, so seductively, that we've forgotten the shape of truth. The lie was simple: be good, and good will follow. But Niccolò Machiavelli knew better. He saw through the beautiful illusion long before modern minds dared to. He looked into the soul of man not with hope, but with brutal honesty. He saw that power is rarely kind, that virtue without spine is not virtue at all. It is currency for the manipulator, a leash worn by the obedient, a tool in the hands of those who will never play by the rules they preach. Machiavelli wasn't cruel. He was clear. He didn't tell you to be evil. He told you not to be naive. Because goodness, true goodness, is not passive. It is not the smiling martyr. It is not the perpetual appeaser. It is not the one who is loved by all. True goodness is terrifying because it sees the dark. It knows the dark, and it chooses the light anyway, but only after making peace with what the world truly island. You were taught to be soft, to give endlessly, to sacrifice without limit, to turn the other cheek even as they spit in your face. And so, piece by piece, you became hollow, lovable but resentful, generous but bitter, seen as good but feeling used. And the world applauded it, because the world doesn't reward real virtue, it rewards obedience. But Machiavelli whispered what most are too afraid to say. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Not because fear is noble, but because love, when not coupled with strength, invites predators. And predators do not pity prey. They consume it. This is a darkness they never told you about. The shadow beneath your goodness, the fire behind your smile, the warrior inside your empathy. You think your pain comes from loving too much, but it doesn't. It comes from refusing to protect the one who loves you. Because the person you've been betraying the longest, the one you constantly sacrifice to please others, is the version of you that knows how to say no. The version that knows how to enforce boundaries. The version that doesn't beg to be seen, but commands respect. That version is still alive, buried under layers of politeness, shame, trauma, and survival. But it's not dead. It's waiting. And this is the moment it awakens. Syphoria begins here, the psychological euphoria and dissonance that strikes when your inner knowing crashes against your outer performance. You smile, but your chest tightens. You agree, but your stomach turns. You stay silent, but your soul screams. That scream is the call to war. Not war against the world. War against your conditioning. The mindset you must now build cannot be soft. It cannot be built on maybe or someday or I just want peace. Because peace is not given. Peace is earned with blood, with fire, with truth. And the truth is, the world only respects what it fears losing. It does not value selflessness. It does not cherish kindness. It does not protect the gentle, unless those traits are backed by power. So now, belief becomes your blade. Not the flimsy belief handed to you in classrooms and sermons. Not the belief in systems that profit from your submission, but belief in yourself raw, unfiltered, unapologetic. The belief that you were not born to serve everyone else's comfort. The belief that your boundaries are not rude, they are holy. The belief that goodness without power is not virtue, it's vulnerability. This is clarity. Cold, sharp, sober. Clarity that burns away the fairy tales you were sold. Clarity that says, if you are going to be good, you must also be dangerous. Not reckless, not cruel, but unwilling to be used. You must learn to say no with a calm that freezes the room. You must learn to walk away not to punish, but to preserve. You must learn to wield silence like a sword, not a surrender. This is the clarity Machiavelli spoke of. The clarity that sees humanity not as it should be, but as it island. the clarity that sets you free from the prison of being liked, because being liked is not safety. Being liked is not power. Being liked is not love. Being liked is often the tax you pay for being forgettable. But being respected, that is earned, and it begins with vision. The vision of who you could become if you stopped watering yourself down. The vision of who you'd be if you stopped chasing acceptance and started chasing alignment. The vision of a you that doesn't just give, but chooses when and how to give, with precision and purpose. This vision doesn't whisper, it roars. It shakes the walls of your old identity. It haunts the roles you've played. It demands a funeral for the version of you that couldn't stand alone. And now you bury that version with fire, with honor, with finality, because your life does not belong to those who fear your boundaries. It belongs to you, and it begins now. And from that fire where your old self is reduced to ash emerges the one you were always meant to become. Not the agreeable version, not the polished, publicly acceptable version, but the real one, the one that doesn't flinch at silence, the one that doesn't beg to be seen, the one that doesn't perform. Discipline enters here not as punishment, but as prophecy, because you now realize your time is holy, your energy is currency, your presence is power. And to waste it, to pour it into people who drain you, into systems that silence you, into habits that dull you, is to betray the very self you just resurrected. So discipline becomes sacred. The morning becomes ritual. The choices become sacred geometry. Every word, every yes, every no, a testament to self-respect. Not the illusion of control, but the embodiment of alignment. You don't discipline yourself to become perfect. You discipline yourself so that your light no longer leaks through cracks of indecision, fatigue, and cowardice. And from this discipline comes action, but not frantic action, not desperate grinding, strategic, deliberate, surgical, because Machiavelli didn't glorify chaos. He glorified order, intentional order. A kingdom must be ruled, a self must be governed. And now you govern, not to impress, not to control, but to protect what is sacred. Your mission, your soul, your voice. You don't act for applause. You act because inaction has become unbearable. You've seen too much. You know too much. You've lost too much pretending to be soft for a world that never intended to return your grace. So you move, quietly, powerfully, unstoppably. And in that movement, something radical begins to happen. You feel grateful, not for comfort, not for ease, but for every scar that taught you strength, for every betrayal that opened your eyes, for every collapse that forced your rebirth. You are grateful not because you have what you want, but because you no longer tolerate what you don't. You are grateful for clarity, for vision, for power, for the pain that ripped the mask off your face and left you staring into the mirror asking, who am I when I stop pretending? And now you know. You are not good by default. You are not kind by obligation. You are not loyal to those who twist your love into leverage. You are dangerous in the most sacred way. A sovereign spirit in a world designed to devour the meek. This is not ego. This is equilibrium. And with it, adaptability blooms. Because now that you know the game, you no longer play it blindly. You know when to speak. You know when to walk away. You know when to bend and when to break. You shift, not because you're lost, but because you choose to adapt without losing yourself. You are fluid, not fragile, sharp, not cruel, soft, but never submissive. And life respects you differently now, not because you demand it, but because you command it by refusing to betray yourself, by refusing to dilute your essence to fit the comfort of the crowd. You are no longer a puzzle piece. You are the table on which the puzzle is built. And from this center, resilience is no longer just survival. It's your birthright. You've buried too many versions of yourself to be shaken now. You've learned that silence is not weakness. That detachment is not cruelty. That walking away is not quitting. It's self-initiation. You no longer collapse when someone pulls away. You no longer implode when things fall apart. You expand because everything you've lost has refined you. Every ending has sharpened you. Every fall has taught you how to rise without needing applause. This is resilience not as reaction but as identity. You don't bounce back. You rise higher. And now, mastery begins not over others, not over the external world, but over the self. Not the shallow self, not the one the world sees and claps for. The deep self, the one you kept hidden even from yourself. The one that once whispered under the noise, beneath the mask, behind the eyes of the child, who first learned that love can be conditional, that kindness can be currency, that good can become a cage. This mastery isn't loud, it isn't showy. It's quiet, it's cold, it's clean. You no longer fight every battle. You no longer chase every answer. You no longer bleed for people who'd never hold your wounds. You become surgical with your time, ruthless with your energy, and sacred with your presence. You walk with the calm violence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Because now you've learned power isn't projection, it's containment. And your presence becomes nuclear not because you radiate aggression, but because you radiate restraint. It terrifies people who were only taught to understand power in volume, in vanity, in control. But you are none of those things. You are the flame behind the eye, the steel beneath the silence, the storm inside the stillness. Because you've integrated the fragmented selves, the pleaser, the performer, the protector, the punished, they've merged now. You've retrieved them from the unconscious. You've named them, faced them, walked them through the fire. And in doing so, you've become Jung's vision incarnate, the whole self. The self who no longer reacts because nothing inside is fragmented. The self who no longer performs because truth doesn't need permission. The self who no longer fears the shadow because it has become an ally. This is the apex. This is what Machiavelli tried to tell us in whispers and warning. If you do not become dangerous, you will be devoured. If you do not master the dark, you will become a pawn for those who have. He never told you to be cruel. He told you to wake up, to see, to know that morality without strategy is martyrdom. That love without discernment is a trap. That virtue without power is an invitation to be used. So now you live not in fear, but in awareness. And that awareness is your final weapon, because it brings you to a place few ever reach. Peace, not the fragile peace of avoidance, not the conditional peace of approval, but the sovereign peace that comes when you realize nothing owns you anymore. No memory, no mistake, no version of yourself that you had to become to survive. You are free, free to speak, free to be silent, free to rise, free to walk away, free to remain unknown, free to be misunderstood, free to be feared. You've outgrown the old game, and from this height, everything looks different. You don't chase, you attract, you don't cling, you select, you don't explain, you exist. And your existence whole, undiluted, unapologetic is the revolution. Because this world was never designed for souls like yours. It was built to break them, to tame them, to numb them, to seduce them into mediocrity. But you said no. You faced the myth. You turned the mirror inward. You watched the persona burn and stood in the ashes. Not screaming, smiling, because for the first time, you weren't afraid to meet the one person you've been avoiding your entire life, yourself. And now we enter the silence that lives at the end of all becoming, the place beyond the archetypes, beyond the persona, beyond even power itself, because power was never the destination. Power was the gatekeeper. And now that you've walked past it, past the traps of image, of control, of fear, masked as ambition, what remains is truth. And it's not loud. It's not impressive. It's not made for the spotlight. It's made for you. Truth doesn't need to convince. It doesn't need to perform. It doesn't need to fight. It just island. And in this final space, after all the wars you fought within yourself, after all the masks you've shattered, after all the clarity you've carved out of chaos, you stand in something very few ever touch. Freedom without apology. You don't ask the world for permission to exist here. You arrive, not seeking acceptance, but offering presence. You no longer crave to be liked, understood, worshipped, or even followed, because you've outgrown the need to be seen. Now, you simply see. You see through people who manipulate with smiles. You see through systems that masquerade as moral, but feed on your obedience. You see through praise that's meant to seduce you back into smallness. You see the game, and you don't hate it. You don't rage against it. You just refuse to play. And in that refusal, your power becomes absolute, because you can no longer be seduced. You can no longer be baited. You can no longer be bought. Your soul is no longer for sale. And that, more than anything, terrifies those who have only ever known how to control the unhealed. Because the healed cannot be ruled. The integrated cannot be gaslit. The awakened cannot be manipulated. And the sovereign cannot be enslaved, not mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. And this is where it ends and begins, because now you don't just carry truth. You are truth. You are the myth Machiavelli tried to warn us about, the one who knows how dark the world is, but walks with light anyway. Not naive, not cruel, not broken, dangerous, because you are finally good in the only way that matters. Good with power, good with vision, good with limits, good with rage when it's righteous, good with silence when it's sacred, good with love that doesn't cost your soul. And the world will never know what to do with someone like that. So let it tremble. You're not here to please it. You're here to rebuild it, one unshakable truth at a time. Starting with this one, you are no longer afraid to be powerful. And nothing can stop a soul like that. And so you walk forward, not with urgency, but with inevitability. Because there is no longer a question about if you rise, only how high. This is what they feared. Not your voice, not your rage, not your rebellion. They feared your clarity. They feared your stillness. They feared the moment you'd stop asking for permission to exist and start acting like you never needed it. Because when a person becomes untouchable, within no manipulation sticks, no seduction works, no threat lands. This is not arrogance. This is fortress consciousness, built from every lie you survived, every betrayal you alchemized, every mask you shattered. And now you walk into rooms without adjusting your light. You no longer scan for approval. You no longer shrink in the presence of loud voices. You no longer wait to be chosen. You are the choice, not because you say it, because you live it. In every breath, in every move, in every refusal to bend where bending would cost your essence. And this is the quiet revolution. This is the kingdom Machiavelli hinted at, but never dared to describe fully, because even he knew there is something more dangerous than a cunning ruler, a free soul, a soul that doesn't play the game, a soul that burns with discernment, a soul that loves without chains, speaks without flinching, and sees through every veil. And now you are that soul, not perfect, but whole, not flawless, but unfuckwissable, not holy in the religious sense, but sacred in the existential sense, because you have become the god of your own narrative, the architect of your own archetype, the sovereign of your psyche. And from this place, you don't lead people, you liberate them, not by telling them who to be, but by showing them what's possible when you stop lying to yourself. You are no longer waiting for a savior. You are no longer hoping for validation. You are no longer flinching at shadows. You are standing in reality raw, unfiltered, undistorted. And the world, it feels that. It responds. It rearranges around the weight of your presence. Because when you move like truth, you don't follow gravity. You become it. You bend the world around your standards, your vision, your inner law, not from force, but from alignment, from knowing, from the clean, unstoppable energy of someone who has nothing left to prove and everything left to embody. So this is not where the story ends. This is where your myth begins, unwritten, unedited, unchained, and undeniable. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them project. Let them stare as you build in silence what they said you'd never become. Let them feel your presence and ask themselves why they can't look away. Because in a world starving for authenticity, you are the flame that doesn't flicker, the presence that doesn't apologize, the proof that it's possible to be good, powerful, awake, and still walk with fire in your eyes. And if they ever ask you how you did it, if they ever beg for the secret, just smile and say, I stopped pretending that being good meant being weak. And everything changed. And now you no longer seek change. You are the change, the silent, sovereign force that makes others question the roles they've been playing, the presence that makes illusions feel paper thin. You don't rage against a world. You make the world irrelevant to your identity. You don't prove your worth. You walk in it. And in that walk, in that posture, in that energy, people feel it. Even the ones who can't name it. They feel it in the way you hold eye contact calm, unwavering, without hunger. They feel it in the way you say no, without justification, without apology. They feel it in the way you no longer chase, correct, explain, or prove. You are no longer dancing for love. You are no longer leaking energy into conversations that don't feed you. You are no longer offering pieces of yourself to people who would not bleed for you in return. Because now you protect your power. You don't just own it, you steward it. You understand that your power is sacred. And sacred things are not thrown to the uninitiated. They are reserved. They are refined. They are revealed only to those who can meet them in truth. And you are truth now. Not the concept, not the theory, but the embodiment. And what is truth, if not freedom crystallized? Freedom from old narratives. Freedom from the guilt of growth. Freedom from the illusion that to be kind, you must be silent. You've burned that lie to the ground because you've realized love without truth is bondage, and truth without love is tyranny. But you have become the integration. You are no longer at war with your own contradictions. You hold paradox like a sword in one hand and a chalice in the other. You are fire and water, steel and softness, the one who loves deeply and walks away cleanly, the one who can cry and command a room, the one who protects their heart like a vault and offers it like a sacred fire. This is who they could never manipulate, because you no longer need from them what you once needed. You've learned how to generate it from within. And now you walk like a sovereign temple. And temples don't chase. Temples don't. And the worthy find their way to you. Because power attracts chaos. And sovereignty attracts truth. You don't need to be many things to many people anymore. You only need to be everything to yourself. And you are. Not in theory. In practice, in embodiment, in every decision to stay aligned when your old self would have caved. In every moment you choose solitude over self-betrayal. In every breath you take with a spine that no longer bows to guilt. This is not just healing. This is sacred warriorship. This is what it means to integrate the Machiavellian edge, not to become manipulative, but to become unmanipulable. To stop being the victim of your own virtue. To carry kindness like a blade, not a burden. And to let the world feel the weight of your integrity. Because now they do. You're not louder. You're not more reactive. You're just undeniable. And when you become undeniable, everything else becomes optional. Validation, permission, approval, all of it irrelevant. Because now, the only question that matters is this: did I stay true to myself fully, fiercely, finally? And the answer is yes. And from that yes, you never bow again. Not to shame, not to fear, not to love that comes with conditions. You walk alone when necessary, together when worthy, always whole. And this is the final ascent, not a climax, not a celebration, but a return to the throne within you that was never empty, only abandoned. You don't crown yourself with noise. You don't anoint yourself with praise. You sit in that seat with quiet breath and steady hands, because you remember now you were never meant to beg. You were never meant to bow. You were never meant to break yourself just to be loved in fragments. You were meant to lead yourself through the fire, through the silence, through the unraveling of every illusion you inherited and every script you were forced to read. And now you walk unscripted. Now you love without losing yourself. Now you give without being emptied. Now you forgive without forgetting who you are. Because you are not here to be good in the way they taught you, soft, small, subservient. You are here to be holy, in the way only the healed can be. Truthful, whole, unshakable. They'll feel it in your stillness. They'll feel it in your silence. They'll feel it in your eyes when you look at them, not with need, but with knowing. Because now you see through everything, and you bow to nothing but your own soul. This is what Machiavelli hinted at, and Jung confirmed, that goodness without awareness is a trap. But goodness with consciousness, that is divinity armed. That is love with a spine. That is the storm wrapped in stillness. That is you now, fully realized, fully remembered, fully home. So go forward, not to chase, not to prove, not to fix, but to radiate, to walk as proof that power doesn't need to be loud, that love doesn't mean losing yourself, and that wholeness was never something to earn. It was what you were before they taught you to forget